Greetings and welcome back. It's your host, Gabe Morales. We are continuing with our coverage of California State Prison-Corcoran and SATF. In part 1, we largely talked about alleged staff abuses there, and I'm sure I'll get some flack over that episode by some present and current guards, but I just call them as I see them. If you don't like this channel, don't watch it. However, I will always try to remain accurate and fair in these videos. I know, you're probably not shocked. There are also many violent and crazy convicts housed there. Prison is seldom a nice place. Just like out in the streets, if jail and prison officers are not ever using force, then I believe they are probably not doing their jobs correctly. If officers are far too frequently using force, then they are also probably not doing their jobs correctly and probably lack good communication skills and supervision. Really, the only time you should frequently be using force is if you are on a cell extraction team, CERT, SWAT, or some kind of high-impact team. If you think you can get away with abusing your authority, well, you might for a while, but at some point you will get caught and might even end up locked up yourself one day. If you're not held accountable now, maybe you will be later. If a citizen is arrested by police for serious charges, hopefully under lawful conditions, they often go to jail where they are usually classified and placed appropriately. In most major jails, they're also screened for gang affiliation, but usually are not segregated solely for that. Most classifications in America today are heavily behavior-based. Once sentenced to prison, inmates get classified again based on a variety of risk factors, which add up into points. Most end up in general population, but if they act out there, then they end up in administrative segregation or in even tighter security housing with even more restrictions like a SHU or VCU. Administrative Segregation Unit at Corcoran was activated in June of 2003 and consists of 8 housing sections in a single-story design. 6 of the sections contain 12 cells and 2 contain 14 cells. Facilities 4A and 4B housing units are maximum security 180 design facilities that include a security housing unit or SHU, an administrative segregation unit or ASU, a debriefing processing unit, and a long-term restricted housing unit. There is also a protected custody or PC housing unit. If my math is correct, there are 64 cells in each pod that are broken up into smaller sections. These cells may be double occupied, resulting in possibly 128 inmates in each unit. One of our listeners, a former CO who helped open up Corcoran, notes that when B facility first opened in 1989, it was all Sureños housed there, and the Norteños were separated over in C facility. Sergeant Effie Rodriguez and his sidekick, Tatu, CO Cantu, worked there at the time, if anybody remembers them from back in the day. 4A to right was all Bulldogs, Sureños, and Aryan Brotherhood shortly after it opened, on the lower tier in bedrock cells, while Blacks, Norteños, and others were on the upper tier in regular cells with metal beds. I heard from one source that they had mixed security levels in the security housing unit. I know that doesn't make sense and seems like would be poor classification move and grounds for lawsuits. But that's what this source said. Razors at the time were the weapons of choice for many, so lots of inmates were getting slashed or giving puto marks, but seldom did it result in death. Many times this was viewed as making a PC move, as you could barely scratch a guy and get pulled up off the yard. Back then, inmates were released in groups out to concrete yards, as seen in several videos. Prior to this, they were escorted by officers in restraints out to the yard, or anywhere outside of their cells for that matter. They were supposed to be strip searched going in and out of their cell, but often secreted weapons prior to that in their rectum. In later years, they placed convicts in single-man cages outside for their recreation time, also known as dog kennels, and you can see them in this picture. Later on, I understand that CDC started housing bulldogs in a separate unit, as they could not get along with any other groups, and having their own yards was a goal that they always wanted, ever since they started back at San Quentin in the mid-1980s. Allegedly, about a year ago, CDC officials bust out the bulldogs and other groups out of C facility. Please let me know if you know the true status of that. By the way, I recently appeared on a Vice TV Bulldog episode, and several people have asked me to do a follow-up video to the Bulldog video I did a couple years ago, and I'll get to that sometime in the near future. Thanks for being patient. 4B Yard was very diverse, and many decided to get along after the infamous 1990 battles. Many notorious prisoners and prison gang members have been held at Corcoran over the years. Charles Manson, leader of the Manson family, was transferred from San Quentin to Corcoran in March 1989, shortly after it opened, and stayed there for much of his time. On November 19, 2017, Manson died at a Bakersfield hospital. Understand that cancer had overtaken his entire body, and he died approximately a week later. While Charlie was obviously sick in the head, he may not have been the craziest one ever housed at Corcoran. Jaime Osuna was housed there and admitted to the very sadistic killing of his cellie, Luis Romero, who was found brutally mutilated in their cell on March 9, 2019. The edges of Romero's mouth were sliced to extend more than 2 inches in each direction, like the Joker, according to a prison report. A square-shaped chunk was cut out of his chest, and part of his rib section was removed. The only weapon authorities found in the cell was a razor blade, which had been tied to a makeshift handle. Officials also said that Romero was conscious during the initial part of the crime, and his spine was cut in 2 places. His eyes were detached and stabbed, and a lung had been partially removed. As they often say, thank God for prisons. Please don't ever let this guy out. Joe Morgan, considered by many to be the honorary godfather of the Mexican Mafia, initially did his time as a youngster at San Quentin, then was held at Folsom Prison for many years. He hit the streets several times, where my mentor arrested him 3 times. Joe was eventually sent to the federal BOP, then was housed at Pelican Bay State Prison, pulled down to New Folsom Violence Control Unit for an old trial, whereby I escorted him into the unit, A section, cell 6. And then he was hospitalized at Corcoran from October 1993 until he died about a month later. Often inmates will hold a little meeting or pass huilas at medical check or communicate while they're at the legal library. Sometimes they'll even use subpoenas as a pro per in order to communicate and pull down other convicts from other facilities. This is a common ploy by prison gang members, and sometimes they even get assistance from dirty attorneys. Understand that longtime MMA member Raymond Chavo Perez de Bakers was housed there in C8 at one time. Understand that Termite from Tortilla Flats was housed in A section. Shadow from 3rd Street, East LA, was in B section. And Robert Alvarez from Santa Rosa, all Sureños, were the mesa that oversaw activities at Corcoran at the time. You can hear more about that from this former M. Camarada. Daryl Castrillon Garcia, aka Dash and D, was very powerful at Corcoran after it opened. He ended up getting released to the streets and okayed a fatal hit on early Mexican Mafia member Frank Buelna, aka Frankie B, at Characters nightclub in Pomona in 2004. I can't remember if I mentioned it ever before, but I was there exactly 1 weekend prior to him being hit, and I was inside the establishment doing some undercover work. I heard that some MA and hardcore Sureños were hanging out there via a family-in-law member, and his girlfriend was the main bartender on duty there. Anyways, Daryl was eventually named as a suspect in that case, fled down to Mexico, and worked for the cartels for many years. It was rumored that he was killed not too long ago by the cartels down in Mexico. Jaco Padilla from Mazusa was there around the year 2000, and old man Nego Cabral de Colton was housed there about the same time. I believe that Michael Boo Moreno de Norwalk was housed at Corcoran around 2012, and Salvador Sergio Perez de Pacas was validating while he was in Corcoran Shoe. Silent George Ruiz from Logan Heights was housed in A2. Henry Indio Carlos de El Sereno was housed in A7, as well as Fernie Bermudez de Dogpatch being in B3, 4 left. Raul Güero Smooth Garcia de Pacas was housed in B3, 4 upper. Raul Molina de Wilmas was in B6, and Antonio Güero Rodriguez de Verdugo in B8. Güero's wife was later killed out in the streets by local Sureños, and Rodriguez committed suicide while housed at Corcoran. And there were several other maid carnales. Harvey Guzman from King Cobras, mentioned in my Richard J. Donovan video, was running his jardín, or money-making machine, until a camarada named Shady took over collecting taxes. Understand that Artie got upset with Shady, who felt he was getting conflicting orders from the Pilis, or MA shot callers. I've been told by multiple sources, both green and blue, that Artie had a stronghold on Corcoran for many years, but other canales soon grew tired of him. For instance, Victor Terco Acuna from Base Grande went to war with him. Also part of the downfall of Artie was when Raul Güero Sherm developed a mesa system, with Güero Caballo Gonzalez from 18th Street, Sipi Huerta de Wilmas, and Pape Roman from Harpies. This mesa was allegedly set up to resolve disputes over territory, drug sales, and money collections. Former MA camarada Robert Alvarez talks about this in another one of his videos. Judy Estrada was also there making a lot of feria, but I understand he too got too greedy and was deemed no good by many. He currently shows being housed at Pelican Bay, and some say is now back in good standings on an active yard. Maybe some of you can verify that. Aryan Brotherhood / NLR member Thomas Pirate Clark was housed there, as well as longtime AB shot caller Chunky Stanton, who is currently housed at Solano. Aryan Brotherhood shot caller Philip Fortman was held up with Wolfie Estacio back in 1989 at Corcoran. Understand that the AB Commission was reformed around that time as Aryan Brotherhood General Blue Norris was undergoing debriefing up at Pelican Bay and was deemed no good. Understand there were about a dozen Aryan Brotherhood members, not counting associates, housed at Corcoran at the time, and this caused a lot of issues within the ranks. It was decided that anybody made recently after 1986 would not be recognized and would have to undergo reevaluation as being brand. These individuals were known as Blue Rocks. Understand that Chunky Stanton advised guys of this situation and told them to chill, relax. It was only temporary, and that most likely they would be cleared later. Fortman told the brothers that if anybody wanted to step back and disassociate themselves, just as long as they had not debriefed, that it would be respected. Blue's right-hand man, Ox, Rufo, was made way back in the day, so it had no effect on him. However, Jesse Brunn, the one who burned up the black inmate in his cell at Old Folsom, had to go and was transferred out of state up to Oregon State Prison. Very few people know about most of this, but you are getting good scoop here. I can assure you of that. And once again, thank you for tuning in and supporting this channel. Corcoran held a large contingent of BGF. Almost 30 were held there, around 210-ish, before most of them were cut loose after the end of hostilities agreement. Some people have talked about a war between the BGF and the AB, or often versus La M, but often these were just black inmates. Sometimes they were BGF, sometimes they were Kumi, Crips or Bloods. So it was not just BGF, it was black convicts in general. But racial fights did in fact occur out on group concrete yards, and this violence was depicted in a loosely based movie called Felon, about staff setting up convicts in gladiator wars. The West Familia was also involved in some fights. I understand that Aryan Brotherhood member Casper Odinson Crow fought NF shot caller and current federal general Cornelio Cornitristan there before both were moved up to the Bay. Güero Grattan did time at Corcoran in 1989 to 1990 before his release to the streets. Güero was always more of a businessman than a gangster, and he was a major force in putting out the Gun Norteño rap CD out on the streets in 1999 and the less successful Cuete CD in the year 2000, around the time of Operation Black Widow. Sheldon Skip Villanueva was also housed at Corcoran in 1989 and caught word via the Border Brothers, who at the time were trying to resist domination by La M, that the Serenos were planning a surprise attack on the Norteños on Cinco de Mayo of that year. Red team was far outnumbered by the blue team, but struck a preemptive attack, and understand that about 20 NF and Northern Structure were involved on Sea Yard, with multiple weapons being found later. Former NF Captain John Boxer Mendoza was also transferred from San Quentin and housed at Corcoran for a minute in 4B4 Lower Pod, and knew that he was heading into a war zone. He was already told what to suspect from vatos who recently came back from there, and most expressed that they would have rather go to the Bay than to Corcoran. He got the official Corcoran speech right off the bus. The only way you're going to get out of here is to die, debrief, or parole, if you're lucky. The Corcoran Regimental Commander Silver Gomez de Farmas was there in 4B around the year 2000 and had a beef with Antonio Sombra Villagrana in San Ho around the year 2002. Angel Chavez de Vaisa was also housed at Corcoran, but I understand he was good with Silver. Raul Mando Quen from Delano was later the regimental commander at Corcoran around 2012 and was killed about 10 years later at High Desert Prison by a CDC gunner while undergoing a removal on the yard. Alberto Manuel Martinez de Sacra was the overall for 4A, but was killed in July 2022 at High Desert Prison. James Slim Bustamante was the overall for 3B and the ASU, but has been held at Solano for a while now. 2010 to 2015-ish, the Norteños and Sureños engaged in several riots at SATF BR. I believe that former Mero Carlos Gabi Arciniaga was hit by the 2.5s in June of 2022. And I heard that a few months ago some 2.5er pesetas were rushed at SATF by non-affiliated inmates. I guess they got tired of their BS too. As mentioned in my DO video, the 2.5ers and the Zapatistas have been at war on several yards in recent years. In addition, old Romero Roland Berry has been housed at SATF for several years now. Danny Papai Roman, mentioned in a personal war story during my Part 1 New Folsom video, was killed at SATF in May of 2020 by Raul Spie Alvarado from Lenox and Edward Cisneros from San Bernardino County. Like several other high-profile Meros, I guess some Pilis, some Canales, Camaradas, or M associates thought he was getting a little too greedy. His daughter Viviana was collecting taxes on his behalf, and many felt that the Romans were abusing their power, both inside and out. His daughter was sentenced in 2015 to 15 years in federal prison after an investigation by authorities dubbed Operation Roman Empire. She will be released from the BOP any day now, and hopefully she has learned her lesson. In September 2024, inmate Bobby Dominguez lashed the throat of the CO when he reached through the shower bars to attack the officer. I see that some people have commented and asked on other channels, what did the COs do to set him off? Well, that could be the case, given the history of some staff at the facility, but Dominguez was no innocent individual, according to his past record. He was received from another facility in Monterey County on June 20th, 2023, just a few months prior, after being sentenced to 6 years for assault with a deadly weapon on a peace officer there. He was initially received from LA County and sentenced to 4 years for inflicting corporal injury on a cohabitant. And while incarcerated, he was sentenced in June of 2016 for an additional 5 years for assault with a deadly weapon, causing great bodily injury by an incarcerated person. In addition, he was sentenced on June 21st, 2017 for another year for an in-prison offense of battery on a non-prisoner. So I'd say this guy was just mean and aggressive. He didn't need a good reason to assault anybody. In December 2024, a correctional officer in Corcoran was accused of planning an assault on an inmate that was in custody. The U.S. Department of Justice announced that CO Raquel Mosqueda was indicted by a federal grand jury and charged with conspiring to violate the constitutional rights of an inmate at Corcoran State Prison. Inmate Jimmy Carter was charged with the same offense. Court documents allege that in April 2022, CO Mosqueda agreed with inmate Carter to allow him to get rid of another inmate. Mosqueda then facilitated an assault of the victim by allowing Carter and other inmates to enter the victim's cell to attack him, which caused great bodily injury. I do not know the status of that case, but it seems to indicate continuing problems at Corcoran. That's all I have on Corcoran Prison and SATF. It may be hard sometimes, but I hope you always do the right thing, even when nobody is looking. Hope you enjoyed this video and continue to count your blessings. Now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.